Welcome to Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong, a podcast where two exes discuss life, love, pop culture, and many other things that come up in conversation. In this week's episode, we talk about Elon Musk and whether he's making it impossible to enjoy the platform previously known as Twitter, and we also delve into some of our recurring dreams and what the hidden meaning might be behind them. Enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. If you've just joined us for the first time, we're really happy to have you with us. My name is Sean.
And hi everyone. I'll just jump in and interrupt you. My name is Josh.
Okay.
Hello everyone.
And we are two exes and we talk about pretty much anything. Pop culture, politics, love, loss, mental health, all the fun stuff.
So stick around for that feast of excitement.
Yeah, you never know what's going to come up. I mean, in the past, we've covered such...
ghosts. We did ghosts last week.
Eclectic topics such as ghosts.
TV witches. The Minogue sisters invariably come up. Not every episode, but they have featured quite predominantly. We're a broad church.
Can we start this episode by talking about the white elephant in the room, which is your hair?
Sure. I bleached my hair yesterday.
And how was that for you?
It was good. I always panic when I take the bleach off because it never looks quite as light as I want it to. But then I always forget, you have to tone it and then, rinse it with like a purple shampoo and conditioner and do the toner on it and stuff. So I always panic at first, but yeah. I'm having more fun as a blonde already.
Yeah, how does it make you feel? Does it give you an attitude shift?
It does actually. And also, I was editing last week's episode because I just, you'd commented several episodes ago on my my frosted white tips, and I'd had a haircut I think 2 weeks ago, and I had practically no frosted tips left at all. And then I was editing last week's episode, and if you're listening this, you won't know what the hell we're talking about. But if you're watching this, you'll see below our videos, there's a little sort of icon with our Twitter handles and Instagram handles and everything like that. And the photo that we used has me with bleached hair, and I kept thinking, oh, it doesn't really match, my video feed doesn't match my icon. So I thought I'd better bleach it. So I'm happier as a blonde.
We can always update those pictures as well. Like if you suddenly get dreadlocks or...
Never going to happen.
Well, I've lost a little bit of weight since we've started this podcast. And I wonder if I'll ever get to a weight where I'll have to change the photo because it will be so... at odds with what I look like on the screen. Possibly. But I don't think that little picture of me really can tell how much I weigh in it.
It's not a full body shot. It looked, just as you were saying, I've lost weight. It looked like it was your hands are off camera, Sean, but it looked like you were sort of like rubbing your breasts as you said that.
No. I think I was rubbing my stomach. I was rubbing my belly.
Okay.
Do my hands look skinnier?
Yeah. Your skinny fingers.
I'm going to become a hand model.
Mm-hmm. I've been told I should be a hand model. I can't remember who was telling me that when I was younger, a lot younger.
Was it the same person who told you look like Boy George?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the checkout attendant at Tesco in Leytonstone. No.
Did we ever determine whether you actually look like Boy George or?
I don't know. I mean, we're both white men. He's a little older than I am.
And a little richer.
We're both queer. I think we both have blue eyes. I don't know. I think, does Boy George have blue eyes? I think so.
You've both chained male sex workers to a radiator in New York.
For the record, I've never done that, people. I've never done that. I love that story in his autobiography. I mean, it's, within the sort of the world of drug addiction, but that hilarious story he tells, and I can't remember it's a Caribbean island, and he is trying to get. I think it was heroin or cocaine. I can't remember which one of two Class A drugs that he was trying to procure. And he tells this quite hilarious story about flying back from somewhere in South America, stopping at this Caribbean island somewhere, and running onto the runway in front of a plane that's going to New York, because he has to get back to New York to get these drugs or something. I can't remember. I should probably have done the research before recounting the tale on the podcast, but it is quite a hilarious story that he tells in his autobiography.
You don't use Twitter or X anymore, do
Very
you?
good. You don't use heroin. Uh, well, I don't really know. I mean, I still have an account and we still list one for the podcast, but that was something I was thinking of talking about today, about whether we all need to just get off X.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's out of control. But I was just thinking, tying in with the Boy George
Mm.
topic. Do you remember that time Boy George said something weird to me on Twitter?
Oh, vaguely. What did he say?
It was something about I tagged him in something because I wanted him to retweet it. It was some sort of vegan event or fundraising, something. I can't remember what it was.
Hmm.
And he wrote, tweeted back to me and said, just because you're vegan, you eat vegan food, doesn't mean you're healthy. And I was just like, what does that mean, mate? Like, are you like fat shaming me? Are you like, it had nothing to do with
But your
what I
handle
was
would have
talking
been
about.
Fat Gay Vegan, so it's not like you were trying to claim to be healthy anyway. Not that
Yeah.
fatness and healthiness can't coexist, but like, what an odd thing to say.
But he gets into a lot of mini scraps and arguments with people, even his own followers on X all the time. Like someone will say something to him that he will perceive as offhanded, and
Hmm.
he'll just completely drag them in a tweet. And then
Okay.
if they get upset, he'll tell them to get a sense of humor and it's just a joke. I mean, it's really odd
He seems like a
interaction.
complicated individual.
Maybe somebody thought you were him because you were in your jaunty hat phase. Because he always wears those hats.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't wearing any hat at Tesco and Leytonstone.
Is that the Tesco Extra, the mega store
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
Good
Um,
memories.
no, I think my jaunty hat days that you remember that I refute, I think they're long gone.
Did you
But
find after we talked about it last time? Did you find that
I
hat? Do you still
didn't
have it?
know. I don't think I've got that anymore. I've got another sort of straw hat. Um, but I mean, I did think when I was editing that episode, I did think about some of your hats over the years. But I think I don't know. I don't think we can go into them on the podcast. And the
Why?
refer-
What
I don't know. I just think the we made fun of them in ways that maybe are not so kind or considerate when viewed through today's lens. So let's just leave it at that. Let me
I
just.
used to have I used to have a Spice Girls hat
Oh,
that
what
was
kind? I don't remember that.
it was like a baseball cap style. I didn't wear it very much. I don't know what happened to it or how long I had it. But you remember when I met you, I used to go around with that
The
Spice Girls
backpack.
backpack.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
used to go clubbing wearing a Spice Girls backpack.
So
So it
cool,
was
Sean. So
so,
cool.
so cool. And I had a Spice Girls t-shirt that I used to wear everywhere. And sometimes I would wear the Spice Girls t-shirt and the backpack at the same time to a nightclub.
Wow, you were really showing everybody.
And it was really not done in a sarcastic way. I was like, this is the coolest
You were
thing
the
I've ever
you were the
done.
fan.
I used to also wear a hat, maybe an LA, was it LA Raiders? Is it a football team or a sports team or
I
I
don't.
can't remember what it was, but I used to have a cap that George Michael used to wear in, I think he either wore it in one of the music videos or
Not
in a
not the
promo
not
photo.
the actual hat.
No,
It's
but
just a similar one.
the same style, the same
Okay,
design. And I used to sometimes wear that out because I was thought I was cool like George Michael.
right. Was that before I knew you?
Yeah, oh yeah. This was when I
Okay.
was like 15 and 16.
Okay.
But I was going to clubs and bars, and I would wear this hat. And I don't know, I went through a lot of very, very rapid fire phases of fashion when I was a teenager. I was like dressed a bit gothy. I dressed super queer with makeup and had my hair permed. And then I went through this sort of George Michael too funky stage where I would wear like
Because yeah,
the
when you
same,
say George Michael, it's like which era George Michael? Like leather
yeah, around,
jackets or?
yeah, like not Faith.
Hmm.
So around too funky, around that sort of era.
Okay. Okay.
And I used to wear. I also went through a Bananarama phase where I used to try and dress like
Well,
Bananarama
that
and early.
incorporates pretty much all of the things that you mentioned before, like permed hair. Um, anyway, well, I can't remember what else you said. You said you were gothy, queer. I mean, that's
Mm,
all of Bananarama. I was just
yeah.
speaking of Bananarama. I was just listening to the new episode of A Journey Through Stock Aitken and Waterman,
Oh, I've
and
downloaded that. I haven't heard it yet.
and it talks about when they went back to the Hit Factory, back to Stock and Waterman, because Matt Aitken had obviously left at that point. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, and I didn't realize that. Which song was it? One of their songs from that sort of return to the Hit Factory was then one of Steps' first singles. One of Steps'
Oh,
first singles. I never know how to say that.
steps.
One of the first singles from Steps, or maybe it wasn't one of their first singles, but maybe it was one of their early songs.
What song was it?
I don't know. I can't remember. But hang on a second. Before we get too far down a rabbit hole, going back to X, um,
Mhm.
I do. I've been thinking a lot about it this week about whether it's a platform I even want to have an account for anymore and support with Elon Musk at the helm. I mean, he is just such a piece of shit. He's just awful. And it just makes me not want to show any support for it in any way at all. So I don't know. It's so hard, isn't it? Especially, I suppose, for you, because that sort of predated your following on Instagram. You first
Mhm.
sort of gained notoriety as a vegan blogger on Twitter, right? That was where you got.
Yeah, it was my first. I think my first platform, possibly at the same time as Facebook, but it
Hmm.
definitely was the fastest growing for me in the beginning, and it's how I got the most interaction.
So how would you feel? Because for me, I mean, it's just a question of sort of morality, whatever. Do I want to be supporting Elon Musk? But for you, I suppose there's an added layer of this was your livelihood for a long time. This was the sort of source of everything that you've done in the last, I don't know, 20 years, 15 years, maybe. Um,
It's difficult, isn't it? Because it's about sharing information, but by being on the platform, you're in some way enriching that individual
hmm.
who has abhorrent views.
And have you
And
noticed stuff like coming up? If you go to your notifications, have you noticed an increase in either explicit right wing stuff or very questionable content that's being fed to you in the
oh,
notifications tab?
constantly, constantly, constantly,
Hmm.
constantly. Like it's luckily I feel informed enough or aware enough to write it all off and just dismiss it, and I can see what's happening. But I
Hmm.
do worry that a lot of people don't have the insight or the critical
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah. And
Not to say I'm like smarter than people, but
no, no, no.
I'm
I
just
was just going to say something along those lines, and I was trying to think how to frame it in a way that doesn't make me sound like an arrogant asshole. But yeah, like it's so interesting when you look at the notifications because there is a lot of problematic content, a lot of right leaning stuff, but then every now and then they'll throw something which could potentially be perceived as being, pro Kamala Harris, for example. But when you look at
Mhm.
it, it's almost like it's not even real content. It's sort
No,
of as if a bot had written it, and
yeah,
it's, and that's what you're saying. Like, like I access a lot of other news sources that I find trustworthy, I believe to be trustworthy or impartial. And so I can sort of, have a broader, perhaps, understanding. But you do worry that people who only consume their news from social media news feeds, that they might not have that same balance. And so it's really scary.
There's also a lot of really unsavory and unpleasant content, like people fighting in the street
Mm,
or people getting injured, things that accounts that I don't follow, and I've never ever searched for that sort of content.
yeah.
But people being electrocuted and dying, or people being shot, and it is content that is so graphic that remember when the internet first started, there might have been one or two websites that were getting banned and taken down that used to show that sort of snuff content.
Mm,
But now it is constantly in my feed.
it's so
Like I'm constantly
normalized.
seeing videos of people dying in my feed on X. So for that reason alone, I mean that can't be good for my mental health
God, no,
to be
no.
constantly exposed to that and to be desensitized
No,
to
and you're an
death and
adult.
suffering.
You're an adult. Imagine what that would do to young people and vulnerable people. That is so. Yeah, it's really fucked up.
But I don't know how to measure how much return on the investment of my time and effort that I get from X, but
Hmm.
I have to get to a point where I think, well, that doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
even if I was running an event and even if I sold 50% of the tickets through a post on X, which I
Hmm.
don't, but if I did, I can't probably justify doing that anymore. But it's just one of those things. Like, I've had that account, like you said, for so long now, probably about 14 years, coming up to
Hmm.
15 years.
Hmm.
And it is how I started everything to do with Fat Gay Vegan. If I delete that, I that's all of that history gone. But another
Yeah.
thing is somebody could take that handle and
Yep.
use it.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you wouldn't have to necessarily delete your account. You could just stop posting, or you could delete all old. I don't know. It's so hard to know. And then you think, well, surely, hopefully, Elon Musk is on some sort of implosion course, and Twitter or X, as it's now known, is not doing so well. Like a lot of the advertisers have pulled back, and you think, well, maybe Elon Musk will sell it again, and then maybe it won't be such an awful place. But it's also such a great resource still. I mean, maybe less so now that we have lots of other means of getting information, but it was such a source of breaking news. I remember when Michael Jackson died, we learned that through Twitter. When I was
Yeah,
in
most major things, right? Like you would find out on Twitter in the last 15 years or so.
mhm. when I was in
Uh,
California this year, early this year, and I saw what turned out to be a SpaceX. I mean, talk about all roads leading back to fucking Elon Musk. But I saw that SpaceX launch, and I didn't know what it was, and so I was on Twitter trying to find out, and that's how I learned what it was. So it is such a great tool in that regard, but it's just owned by such a despicable individual.
yeah.
Is
And
he gonna sue us? Is that slander?
well, that's your opinion that he's not a nice person. You're not saying he's done actual things. You're not libeling him with
He's
actual,
guilty of arseholism.
right. I mean, there's enough other people actually giving specifics about what not a nice person is, like his daughter, who
Hmm.
um, had a lot of things to say about his behavior and what a not very nice person he is.
Hmm.
But X and Twitter, or Twitter, I suppose we're talking about, even when you would, if you were in Mexico or Los Angeles and you thought you felt an earthquake, that would be the first place you'd go to
Yep.
see if people were tweeting about it. You'd search for a hashtag, and it was a
Yeah.
way to get not real time, but almost real time responses or information about things you're going through. It's as close to synchronous information sharing as we kind of get
Yeah.
in this world.
Yeah.
But now you can't trust the information that you get on there. It's all just a load of garbage.
I know, it's pretty distressing.
Talking about big news events like Michael Jackson dying or earthquakes, we talked a few episodes ago where like Trump being shot at
Hmm.
was not as big a deal as it would have been when we were younger. Like people
Hmm.
just moved on. It's kind of like, that's horrible, but let's move on.
Hmm.
And it's almost like now, even his own supporters don't even talk about it. I mean, you could go down a whole conspiracy thing about that. But what do you remember from when you were younger were news events that stopped the world? Like, what are some things that were maybe as big as that where everybody had to talk about it, or it was just almost like earth shattering or earth stopping?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is 9/11. I think that was just, I don't know, it's so hard to describe the the societal reaction to it. I remember we were living in Stratford, and I remember getting the Central Line home that day, and it was just in the early days of that. Was it the Metro? No, not the Metro newspaper, because that comes out in the morning, but maybe it was the Evening Standard. But I just remember being on the way home and everyone just sort of being looking really stunned. I mean, it was, and then walking through that shopping centre in Stratford on the way back to our place, and in the electronics store window they had the TVs just showing you know the planes crashing into the buildings or whatever.
Yeah,
um
I can remember being going back on, I think, the Jubilee line. Is that what it's called?
oh yeah, yeah, you were
And it
coming
goes
from
under
Bermondsey.
Canary Wharf.
Mm,
And it didn't stop, I think, for a little while or a few days
yeah, that's
after, they
right.
wouldn't stop there.
Hmm.
Uh, but what about going back earlier in time than 9/11? Like when you were young, what big things happened that really shook you to your core or everybody stopped?
There must have been others, but 9/11 is sort of overshadows everything else. I mean, I, I don't know, it's not the same, but when Princess Diana died, I remember that
Oh, yeah.
was quite,
Yeah.
but that was pre-mobile technology, really. That was, or very, very early days of it, perhaps. So most of us just got our news from TV or
Well,
newspapers.
do you remember how you found out? Because you were in Sydney.
Yeah, I was at Bondi Markets, like a big outdoor market down, I think down near the beach in Bondi. And just I was at a stall and I overheard, I think, the stall holder saying something about Princess Diana's been in a car crash. And I went back to the place in Barkham Avenue, and we had, as I said in last week's episode, we had Foxtel, or one of those early cable news channels, and we turned it on, and we were just, I mean, I was also smoking a lot of weed at the time, so I was very stoned. And yeah, I don't know, it was just very, that was probably the first really sort of global reaching news story that really, rippled throughout all of my immediate societal connections. What about you?
Obviously, things before we were born, like the moon landing, would have been that.
Yeah,
But
and
I
I
think the
still remember like my mum talking about the moon landing and how one person on her street had a television. I think at that point, and like they had like I don't know 40 people crammed into their living room to watch it and stuff. So yeah, that would have been
I think
amazing.
the earliest thing that I remember, and maybe because you're a couple of years younger than me, aren't you? You might not remember it,
I think
but
yeah,
it was the Challenger
yeah.
disaster.
I thought you would say that. Yeah, yeah.
I can
I do
remember that
remember
being
that. I do
huge,
remember
a
that. That was
really big
so.
deal.
That was really. I mean, you know, that I remember I was in primary school and we were crying because one of the astronauts was an elementary school teacher, wasn't she?
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, we were crying, primary school kids, and it was, it was and still is such an awful thing. And I just went down a rabbit hole a few years because I was watching. Did you ever watch Glow? Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling? Not the original
No,
show, but the dramatization on Netflix a few years back.
no.
It was an amazing series. I loved it, and they did I thought it was a really well crafted scene in that where I think Ruth is the character's name, is in character. She, as her wrestling character, she played a Russian woman who was like very anti-American, and she's doing this, live broadcast in character, and as that happens, the Challenger explosion unfolds at the same time. It's very well
Okay.
crafted. Apologies for the spoilers if you haven't watched it yet. Um, but
Or if you didn't know the Challenger has exploded.
yeah, yeah. But that sent me down a rabbit hole, and I started watching all this stuff on YouTube, and it's really, really like heart wrenching because you see, all the families of the astronauts are there at Cape Canaveral on these sort of like bleachers set up to watch the launch. And there's all this footage, which probably wasn't broadcast at the time, but now that I don't know how many decades have passed, but it's now all sort of there on YouTube, and you see this look of just bewilderment turn to just, I don't know, I don't even know if I have the words to describe it. Just this horror on their faces, and they're all sort of led away hastily, and it was really, really awful to watch.
We're probably both too young to remember when Ronald Reagan had an assassination attempt, right?
Yeah, I remember reading about it in years later, but I don't remember it happening.
And wasn't the guy who tried to shoot him also like Jodie Foster's stalker?
That rings a bell. But
And
who
because
knows? Was that real? Or was
she
that
would have
some one of
been.
those urban myths that went around
No, I
back in
think
there?
it's real. I think when they got found him, I think that he had been obsessed with Jodie Foster, but as her as a child actor or teen
Well,
actor.
my name is Tallulah.
Uh huh. But what was that other movie she was in where she played a sort of child
Um,
prostitute? Was
well, well, in addition to Bugsy Malone,
Oh right,
she wasn't explicitly a prostitute, but yeah, what was that? I can't remember. But
wasn't
yeah,
Taxi Driver,
oh
was it?
yeah, Taxi Driver. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it just got me. I was thinking before about what are things that actually just stop the world, and it just
Sorry,
seems to be that they don't really exist anymore.
I'm sorry to like bring it back to lightheartedness, but it just reminded me. Did you see that clip that went around this week of Jodie Foster getting her glasses out of her glasses case?
Uh,
There's this very strange clip that I saw, and it's Jodie Foster, and she's being filmed for like an interview or something, and she's getting her glasses out of her glasses case, and she opens her glasses case, and like with her tongue, she like pulls her glasses out. And so now it's
why
just I don't know. It's really strange. Anyway,
is
sorry.
she joking? Is
No,
she doing
she
a
looked completely like that's how she always did it, sort of thing. Um, but sorry. Anyway, back to the serious content um, of this Ronald
news
Reagan
that shakes the world?
assassination. Um,
But did you know that in Australia there was some? Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last episode of the episode before about the Melbourne Cup, the horse racing,
yeah,
which it's not that serious. I mean, it's serious because horses are abused and injured and killed, but it's not a serious news item. But it actually stops Australia, like
yeah, yeah,
especially when I was a child.
yeah.
And sporting events were really like that in
Mm,
Australia. I don't know if they still are because I don't live there at the moment. I don't have a sense of the national temperature of those things anymore. But
mm,
when I was a kid, there was a boat race called the America's Cup or
yeah,
something. It was like a sailboat race,
yeah,
and I think an Australian crew won it one year, and I
yeah.
was very young. But because of the time that it was happening, it was very early in the morning on TV. But everybody in Australia got up. We were all brainwashed into thinking that this was some sort of achievement, and
Mm,
everybody in Australia got up and watched it. And
yeah.
then when this team won,
Mm,
the Prime Minister of Australia, Bob Hawke,
Yeah.
at the time. He went on TV and he looked drunk. He was known as a bit of a drinker, and he looked drunk and he said, I declare today a national holiday. Anyone today, any boss today who sacks a worker for not coming in as a bum.
Really?
And I mean, he couldn't do that, and people had to go to work. But
Yeah.
that's how much people are obsessed with sporting achievements in Australia.
Yeah.
And I suppose similarly, I think we both lived in the UK when it happened, when Kathy Freeman won
We sure
gold
got the
medal at
gold.
the
Yeah.
Sydney Olympics in
Yeah.
2000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the same thing. Like the entire country stopped to watch that race.
That 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 Australian person, the guy I can't remember his name, who won the America's Cup. No, is that what it's called? America's Cup. Um, I just was watching Miriam Margolyes, her new series about Australia. I don't know how new it is, but her most recent series about Australia, and she mentions that and how it kind of stopped the world for her and everything. But you see, I don't remember the Kathy Freeman one as much because I'm just so detached from sports and
Yeah, but
Olympic
we
sports.
didn't live in Australia at the time,
Yeah, yeah,
so you wouldn't have known. I mean,
yeah.
I think if you had been in Australia, you would have not been able to ignore it. It would have been one of those instances where the office wheeled the TV in, or everyone
Yeah,
was told to take 3 hours off so they could watch it.
yeah. But the other, it's not quite perhaps to the same global level, but I do remember clearly when I found out that Kurt Cobain had died. Where were you?
Hmm.
Where did you find out?
I think I was in. There used to be a record store chain, a music chain in Brisbane called Brashes. And I don't even know if it was in there or if it was a different one, but maybe I was in Brashes and somebody said, "Oh, did you hear Kurt Cobain died?" I mean, this is
Mm.
pre-internet, right?
Oh yeah.
So somebody would have heard it on the radio or
What
seen it
year
on
was
the
that? Was it like
TV.
94,
Can't remember.
3, 4,
I
maybe
I,
five,
I
no,
couldn't.
95? I don't know.
I would guess, yeah, anywhere between 93 and 95, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean, it was definitely pre 97.
Yeah, yeah, and it was. I don't know. I can't remember when it was. Like I saw Nirvana in concert, and I can't remember what year that was.
Yeah.
What year
Yeah.
did they sort of break out? Like 91?
Yeah, 92 maybe. 91, 92. I
How
mean,
weird! Like just time frames, like time spans and timelines are just a blur to me.
and
I
you
don't
still
know.
see, like, you still, not loads, but you do still see quite a lot of Nirvana shirts, even
Young
on young
kids.
people.
Yeah, mostly
Yeah.
on young kids,
Yeah.
like people who look like tweens wearing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got this allure, hasn't he, of somebody who's like a lost soul and
Mm.
misunderstood and was
Mm.
too sad for this world, and so teenagers or people going through a hard time often gravitate to that.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about when I'm not laughing about someone dying, but when Gianni Versace died, and
Uh, Jim.
he died because he got shot, right?
Yeah.
And he died, and there were these two queens, and when I say queens, I mean gay
Flamboyant
presenting.
homosexuals.
Yeah, like evidently,
Overtly
like
gay.
there were these two queens that used to dress in Versace all the time, like but real, the really gaudy, ugly Versace sort of
Hmm.
clothing, and they used to walk around the Pitt Street Mall in Sydney, and
Mm.
just walk around and like it's almost like they were modeling for people. They would like walk around with their noses in the air and like really hoity and just walk up and down.
Hmm.
And I was on the Pitt Street Mall the day that Gianni Versace was killed, and so the masthead of the paper was, I don't know whether it said Versace murdered or Versace assassinated or something, but really big, the whole front page of the paper.
Hmm.
And these two had it open facing out and were just walking up and down the mall in their Versace, holding it up with dark sunglasses on.
How could they afford to just do that instead of working? Like they must have been
Who
rich.
knows? Who knows what was going on?
Wonder what they're
But
doing now.
there's some. It was a real thing in Australia of like the nun in Brisbane.
Oh,
Did
I
you
never
ever
saw
see?
her. I
You
heard
never
about. I
saw the
remember
nun?
you and Monique talking about her.
Yeah, somebody who was. We don't think she was a real nun, but used to dress in old nun like outfits, but like it'd be 36 degrees in Brisbane, and she was in layers and layers and layers of these dirty clothes with a habit on, and she used to race around the pedestrian mall, the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, like she had
Mm,
somewhere to go, and then she would stop and sort of think, and then turn around and walk the other way, and then go for a little bit, and then stop, and then go in another direction. And
right.
she was really famous in Brisbane. Like people were like, "Oh my god, the nun, the nun." And I can
Mm,
remember once I was walking along the river, and a passenger ferry was going along the river, one of the smaller ones,
mm.
and you used to be able to go and sit upstairs on them. And it was pouring with rain and really windy. And the nun was stood on top of the ferry in the rain at the front, like stood at the front, like with her handbag, sort of like she used to carry this dirty big bag with her, and she just
Is
stood
it a
there.
Versace handbag?
No, but she was very, very entertaining. She was like somebody that we used to get such a thrill out of seeing.
Yeah.
What What did you first think of Australia when you came there? Because when you got there in '96, was it
97,
'97?
97.
Was that the first time you'd ever been there?
Yeah. Yeah. First time. Um, I don't know. It was funny. Like I remember because I arrived in the middle of winter, and so it was a lot colder and wetter than I imagined. Um, and I wasn't I wasn't that keen on it for the first few months. I mean, I liked some aspects of it. It was really nice to be because I didn't go to university when I was a kid. I always lived at home, so it was my first time living away from home, and it was great. It was me and Andrew moved in with Sally and Chris in Darlinghurst, and it was just such a fun place to be. It just was so different to everything I'd known. So that was great, but I don't know. It's funny, like you don't have a sort of narrative for periods of your life when you're there. It's only afterwards that you look back and reflect. But yeah, it felt very liberating to be far away from everything I'd known.
But was there anything that was a real culture shock where you felt, oh, this is really different to what I'm used to?
Um, I don't know. I suppose, yeah, I think even though Sydney is a relatively large city, it was still a lot more manageable than London. Having grown up in London, you just become so used to a huge, huge, sprawling city. So it was nice to be able to walk right into the CBD and walk to the Opera House or stuff like that. So that was culturally, quite different. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure. I'm not sure I can think of anything on the spot, but I'm sure there are like a million things. It was. I remember how cheap things seemed because it was the days before GST, which is is the equivalent of a British VAT or sales tax. I think you call it in the States, but it was in the days before that existed in Australia, and everything seemed so cheap. We would eat out. We would go and get takeaway or takeout from places, and it just seemed so affordable. Um, I don't know. It was
Did
just
you feel that there was a different feeling of from the people, like people's attitude in general? Like, did people feel different from the UK or from London?
yeah. People are friendlier. I mean, people in the UK are quite cold, aren't they? I mean, that's obviously a
They can
generalization,
be.
but especially
Well, in certain places.
In
Yeah.
London, yeah. In London, people are cold. In Sydney, people are a lot friendlier. I don't know if that's still the case, but in the 90s, it was. You get talking to people at the shops. And also, we lived in the neighborhood, and that was, the equivalent, I suppose, of Soho in London. We were living it right in the heart of the neighborhood, so it was just, yeah, it was a very liberating, freeing experience for me to suddenly be dropped into that kind of environment.
When Hill and I went there last year, at the beginning of last year, he commented that people just seemed a lot happier in Australia.
Okay.
And obviously, he's just been living in London for 3 years, and he felt that people here are quite miserable and unhappy.
Mm.
I think it's quite a tough life here in the UK, especially in London. It's financially quite brutal.
Yeah.
The weather can be a bit of a downer. There isn't a lot of space.
Mm-hmm.
It's very crowded, like you were saying before.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to Australia, people have a better quality of life.
Yeah.
There's fresh fruit and vegetables. There's a lot more sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
People are, it's quite a rich country, and not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people to share it around.
Mm-hmm.
And he just felt that people seemed happier there, and it seemed a more
Yeah.
enjoyable place to be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think quality of life, standards of living are higher in Australia um, than the UK in some ways. I think, like you said, like I don't know. I mean, I'm not an economist, but I don't know if GDP is higher or what the I don't know what the factors are. But even taking the economic side of things away, like you're saying, just the weather is better. People live a much more outdoors lifestyle in the UK for nearly half the year. We sort of live indoors. It's only light. For a couple of months, it's only light for about I don't know 5 or 6 hours a day. It's a bit grim sometimes in winter.
I But until I came to the UK for the first time in 1998, I had never seen central heating. I'd
Mm,
never seen, I didn't know what it was, how to
mm,
work it. And when I first came here and I went to stay at your mum's house
mm,
in Chiswick, and she went away for like 3 days, or went away for the weekend, and I was staying in the house, and your mum turned all the heating off. And
yeah.
I didn't know how to turn it on. It was the middle of winter. I mean, it was probably February time, and it had been snowing. I'd never seen snow really before, and I was so cold in your mum's house, and I was too scared to go and try and turn the heating on. I wouldn't have even known how to start
Mm-hmm,
because it probably had a thermostat, and it wasn't just like switch it on or switch it off. You had to
mm-hmm.
change. And I didn't even know, like, if you haven't been to the UK or a cold climate where they have thermostats, I'm sorry, central heating, they're like metal grates on the wall. And I didn't know. I thought gas was going through that. Like, I didn't
Oh,
know that it
really?
was
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
what is it? Like hot water, isn't it?
It's
Or,
no. It's like a. I don't know if it's not oil, but it's like sort of heated water-based liquid, but it's a lot thicker than water, I think. Um, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it is just hot water, but it's like a liquid that's piped through the house and then fed into these things on the wall. I mean, I'm sure most people know these days what it is, but
I mean, the only sort of experience or knowledge I had of central heating was when I would watch movies or TV shows set in the US, in New York,
mm,
particularly, where people would bang on the radiator to get the
yeah. Send up
superintendent
the
to
heat.
send, like Bette Midler, what's that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In beaches.
Beaches and beaches. And because the superintendent would switch off the heat and they'd
Yeah,
bash the pipes to let them know to send up the heat.
yeah.
So that's the only experience I had. So I was like, what is there, like Freddy Krueger downstairs where I have to
If
ask
someone's
to
living
turn on
under
the
the
heat?
house,
Yeah. But
that's so funny.
one of the strangest things for me when I first came to the UK was like we talked about it last time, was just the drinking culture, like people going to the pub every day. Now people drink a
Mm,
lot in Australia, but it's mostly like binge drinking on the weekends.
yeah.
But in England, people would just go to the pub 5, 6 nights a week.
Mm,
You'd go to the pub and then race home with some food to cook for dinner and watch EastEnders. Or
mm,
so even if you went for 1 or 2 pints, people were just going to the pub every day, and I found that really weird.
mm. I don't know if that's still the case. I don't know if things have changed.
Also, people have got no money. It's desperate in the UK at the moment. People
Mm,
are so broke.
Hmm.
I mean, me included. It's like everything is so expensive. Like the cost of groceries. I've got this like annoyance with the supermarkets here. Everything is really expensive, but they
Mm.
give you these discount cards or cards where you collect points or you can get rewards.
Mm.
But the reward prices are more expensive than what I was paying a year and a half ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah,
getting 50p off a bag of spinach, but the bag of spinach is like £3.50.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas 2 years ago, it was like £1.50.
Hmm.
So it's getting to a point where it's unsustainable to buy groceries.
Hmm. I know, I know, and it's just I mean, and lots of reasons. Again, we're not economists, but Brexit, I think, has driven up prices. The war in Ukraine is has drove up prices. I don't know. I just think, yeah, it's not a great place to be at the moment.
I think Brexit is a real consideration for why things are a lot more expensive. I think sometimes things like war or conflict are used by
Oh yeah, yeah.
corporations as
They
an
just use it
excuse
as
to
an
put
excuse. I
prices
mean,
up.
that's the thing. Like, the price of oil did shoot up at the beginning of the Ukraine war, and I think they've come back down now. But of course, companies put their prices up, but they're not going to put their prices back down. So yeah, you're right. It's just used often as an excuse to do something.
Completely swivel pivot
Oh yeah.
topic here. Have you heard that new song by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars?
No, no. I saw something somewhere, but it didn't have any audio, and I thought, oh, I have to listen to that. And
Hmm.
how is it? What's it like?
I think it's a really good song. It's not bad romance poker face style Gaga.
Hmm.
It sounds like a 1970s alternative country pop song.
Because that's what the video vibe is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've actually dressed up as, I forget who the old singers are. There are two, a man and a woman singer who performers who they've dressed a similar way to.
Hmm.
So I don't know who it is, but it they both sound incredible. I mean, their voices in it and the way they harmonize is really incredible.
Hmm.
And it sounds like a live band. It sounds like live music being played,
Okay.
and I think it's great. It's a bit middle of the road, but in a very purposeful way. Like they've made like a 1970s soft rock sort of power ballad, or it sounds like alt country, sort of like
Okay.
that sort of whole LA sort of music scene that was easy listening in the 70s. It
Okay.
sounds really good. I mean, I've heard it maybe about 5 or 6 times, and it's really stuck in my head. Like they've written a
Well,
very, very catchy pop song.
I will make a note to listen to it as soon as we stop recording today.
And Gaga was said online, who knows how true any of this is, but I think that her and Bruno Mars are kind of friends in some weird Hollywood sort of way. And
Okay.
she said one night he called her and said, "Oh, we're in the studio working on music, and I've written something that I think that you will love to contribute to. We're working on something." And
Hmm.
she said she headed down there, listened to it, loved it, and they worked through until the morning, finished writing it together, and then recorded it all in that
Okay.
night. And
Okay.
then I think it's just for the sake of that they wanted to do it, that it's a single. Obviously, it ties into her album's not coming out until next year, so it won't be on that. And
When
it's
when
just
when does
this
the what's the Joker film called with Joaquin? When does that come out?
maybe October, around
Folie
somewhere
was it
towards the end
Folie
of
à
the year.
Deux? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm too
Or
uneducated to speak
too
French.
Australian?
Too Australian, mate.
Too okay. Um, I would like to pivot, if I may, and just
Pivot away.
ask: have you ever had any recurring dreams?
Yes, but I'm. Oh, yes. I've had a recurring nightmare since I was a child
Okay.
that I sometimes still get at, even as an adult.
Hmm.
Adult. That's a
Yeah.
weird way of saying it, isn't it? As an
Adult,
adult. Adult.
as an add-on.
As an adult. It is a dream where it's not the act of me killing someone, but
My God, this is so weird. Okay.
apparently in my dream I know that I've killed somebody,
Okay.
and I've buried their body in a hole in my back garden or front garden,
Okay.
and I've covered it in cement, and I've done like I put like tin down, I've put dirt down, I've put cement down, and I've thought, okay, I've done enough to get away with this. So I kind of feel like maybe in the dream, it's not clear if I did it on purpose or if it was an accident or if it wasn't even me, but I was scared I was going to get it pinned on me. And in the dream, it's the same exact same dream every time, the same feeling. So it must be a way of my subconscious working out stress or trauma or anxiety. And so it gets to a point in the dream where maybe it's gone 2 or 3 years, and I think, oh, one day I'll get to a point where I don't worry about it anymore and it's not a problem for me. But then in the dream, the police come and say, we want to dig up your yard. And then I wake up.
That's oh my God, okay, this is not planned. That's so strange because 2 nights ago
Yeah.
I have a recurring dream. I don't have we ever discussed this. I don't know if we've ever discussed
I don't
this.
know if I've ever told you that. It's a very,
No, I
very
don't think
stressful
I've ever
dream for
heard
me.
that from you before. But 2 nights ago, I had, and this is a recurring dream I have too, that I've killed somebody. But mine's different in that every time I have this dream, and it may be like years that it might be like once every few years I'll have this dream, but I've been having it, intermittently for most of my life. And just 2 nights ago, I had this dream, and it was, I can't remember the exact details, but it was, I'd killed somebody. And every time I have this dream, it's a different scenario that I've killed somebody and I've hidden the body, buried the body. And then I wake up, like I actually wake up. And for, I don't know how long it is, it feels like a minute, maybe it's only 5 seconds. But for that really sort of weird time between being asleep and being awake, I think I am just filled with the most overwhelming sense of dread. Um, I'm in the real world at this point, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I'd forgotten that I killed that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that I've done it for all of that, whatever it is, 5 seconds or 60 seconds. And
That's the same. That's the same for me.
it's such a distressing feeling because you're like, I can't live with this. I can't live with this guilt and this baggage that's tied around my neck. And then then you wake up properly and you're like, oh my God, thank God it was just a dream. Like, but it's just for that brief moment. It's so upsetting.
It's the same for me. Like when I wake up from this dream, I I think I'm there and I'm awake and I'm in the real world, and
Yeah,
I think, how am I going to get away with this? What's going to happen? Like, am I going to
yeah,
go to prison?
yeah.
And
And
I'm
it's
lying in
like
my bed thinking, yeah.
and it's like it's like it's sort of it just all this weight of emotion and repression is just like unleashed, and in that second you're like, I can't believe I'd you know in my head or my heart or whatever, I managed to like lock that away somewhere, and now I've just dreamt about it and it's reminded me that I did kill that person, and then 20 seconds later you're like, oh my God, it's just a dream. But yeah, it's that period is it's so distressing. I don't know, and I was just thinking about it today because it was 2 nights ago I had that dream, and I was like, what does it mean? I mean, not that dreams have to have like a mystical, spiritual meaning, but I think it often is our subconscious trying to process stuff. And I'm like, what does it signify? What's going on in our subconscious? And I don't know, maybe I was thinking about it just in the context of sort of trying to make changes in your life. Like, are you having to, is it symbolic of having to bury an older version of yourself, perhaps? Is that what it
Possibly.
is?
I mean, it might not mean anything. It might
Well,
just be
yeah,
that you were tired or you
yeah,
weren't getting enough vitamins that week, or.
yeah, yeah. Maybe it's completely.
But yeah, what about the concept of sleep paralysis?
Hmm.
Have you ever had that?
Yeah, once when I was a kid, and um, I remember. I don't really remember the context. I was flying in my dream, and then I was very aware that I was actually awake, but I couldn't open my eyes. I was completely paralyzed, and I was trying to shout, um, and I couldn't open my eyes. I was completely, completely paralyzed. I'm sure I was still breathing, but it felt like I had no autonomy over like my movements.
Do you think that that really happens, or your brain is telling you that you're awake and you can't move?
I don't know. I mean, I remember clearly because I was in my parents' bed, so I must have been quite young. And I remember, like, I think I was lying in between my mum and my dad, and I was very conscious of where I was, but that I couldn't exit, this like dream state, and that I couldn't move my body or open my eyes even. It was weird.
So it used to happen to me a lot, especially when I was younger.
Hmm.
And then into my adulthood, it lessened. And I think it happens to children more than it happens to adults.
Hmm.
That's why people often remember it so horrifyingly when they talk about it, because it was something that happened to them when they were children and they were really scared by it.
Hmm.
And I used to feel that I was like exorcist style pinned to the bed by an omnipresent force that I couldn't see, that
Hmm.
was holding me down and I couldn't move. And it was holding me down with so much pressure that I couldn't even speak, or sort of I felt if I
But
breathed
was
out, I
this
wouldn't be able.
was this with your eyes open?
I would think sometimes my eyes were open, but now I don't know whether they really were, or if I
Yeah.
was just dreaming.
Yeah.
And because sometimes my eyes would be open, and because I was in the dark, I thought I could see the demon or the shadow that was holding me down in the corner of the room. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people report the same sensation.
Hmm.
So that's why people talk about sleep paralysis demons.
Hmm.
But it's happened a few times, like when we were together and we were sleeping in the same bed. It happened to me quite a few times. I mean, over the course of how long we were together, but probably like half a dozen times.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be trying to say your name, or my brain believed I was trying to say your name, and I was slurring the word, like almost whispering your name, like because I
Yeah.
couldn't speak. But I don't know if that really happened. And normally,
Was
what
that
would happen?
sorry to circle back, but was that a Celine
Yeah,
Dion song? Does she ever whisper your name? Am I imagining that? Was that a Celine song? Does
it
she
could
ever
be.
whisper your name? Was that Celine?
Yeah, and then she did it in the voice of someone with sleep paralysis. No, that's not a good joke because she had stiff person syndrome,
That's very
or
true.
has it.
Yeah.
I revoke that joke.
I'm gonna
But
cancel. I'm gonna cancel you. You can forget like having to make a decision about whether to come off X or not. You're gonna get cancelled.
I think if I was that way inclined to make jokes about people's disabilities, I'd be welcomed on X.
That's
That
true.
seems to be
That's
the
true.
current state of things over there.
That's true. Well, Boy George might cancel you anyway. Sorry, you
He'll
were saying. You were
fat
saying
shame me off of X.
health shame you.
So I got to the stage where I would tell myself, this is something that happens and it will pass. You
Mm,
just have to lie there and relax. And then what would happen is I'd go back to sleep.
okay.
So I would never ever go to fully awake and stand up and walk out of a room from that state of believing I had sleep paralysis.
Mm,
I would always go back to sleep.
yeah.
But as I became older and I could understand that it was probably just my brain doing weird things, I would I would then just remind myself, because similar to what you would do with a panic attack, you
Yeah.
kind of try and be inside the chaos and say, look, I know it feels like that on the outside, but it's
Yeah.
just going to
You
pass soon.
try and like convince your mind to not respond to the signals in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so interesting, I think, that you have had that recurring dream over the years, and that I had it. I've had it and had it very recently. And I did, I was thinking this morning about it, and whether it did have a meaning, whether it was my subconscious trying to process stuff. And the way I sort of thought about it this morning was that, yeah, maybe it is during periods of change when you're sort of having to, and that could just be that during periods of change, your anxiety levels are just higher anyway. Your cortisol, whatever, you know, might be higher. And maybe that's what causes it. Or maybe it is very much a way of your subconscious trying to contextualize or visually process or emotionally process something. And it reminded me of a quote, um, and I wrote it down just because it's a quote I love, and I don't want to be one of those people that just lives their life based on quotes because there's a very hilarious video I just saw. I don't know if you saw it, but I'll read the quote first, just as I let it. So it was the US writer Joseph Campbell who said, "We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us." And I like it just because I think, to get all serious and personal for a second, but when you and I were sort of in the process of breaking up, and we haven't really talked about that on the podcast too much about what it was like coming out of a long 2 decade relationship. As I'm sure anyone listening or watching can imagine, it wasn't an easy process. And that quote sort of popped up somewhere, I don't even know where, around that time, and I found it quite sort of poignant, quite sort of helpful in some ways. That it was very much. I hope you don't mind me talking about it, Sean, but it was very
Yeah.
much having to let go of a future that I'd imagined, that would always be, you and me as a couple, and having to, you know, become accustomed to a different future, and one that I hadn't necessarily fully imagined or visualized yet. But I found that quote very, very helpful, very healing. Um,
Great.
but
Happy for you.
Thank you very much. But have you seen that clip? It's that guy, and I don't know if it's a couple. I don't know what the scenario is. There's a guy in, I don't know if it's the one house or if it's taken in many houses, and there's a woman filming and like laughing and like giggling. And I think the context, I could be wrong in this. I think the context is they're going to like open houses. It's in America or Canada, I think, and they're going to maybe viewings of people's open houses, and maybe it's in one single house, um, but they're making fun. It's like one of those show homes where they've got all these like horrible, cheesy quotes like on the walls. Have you seen this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about at all. No.
Oh, well, I'll send you the link, but it's so funny. It's like, when you go into like, just like the pound store or whatever, and you just see like little homewares that say things like live, love, laugh, or be happy, like BEE, and it will be like, motifs of little bees buzzing around, be happy,
Yeah.
just like really cheesy, cringe shit like that. Um, but it's so funny the way they do it. And I had to write some of them down because they made me laugh so much. So obviously there was the classic live, laugh, love.
Hmm.
But then, there was, I think in the dining room, there was one on the wall that said gather. And in fact, now I read them out, it must have been it must be set in different houses because there was another one in a different dining room that said eat, rest. And then there was like the guest bedroom and it said love you more on the wall. And there was one beast. Oh, that's right. I think this was in the bathroom above the bathtub. Soak, relax, unwind. Anyway, it
Hmm.
just goes on and on and on. There are too many to read them
I
all.
love the concept of those. Uh, that you need somebody to tell you what to do in each of those
Yeah,
rooms as well.
yeah.
Like you would forget to
You
relax in the
get into the
bathtub,
bath and think, well, what the hell am I supposed to do? Oh, right,
or
okay.
you all walk into the dining room together and you forget that it's a gathering. You
Mm-hmm.
forget to gather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it.
Okay, well, that's everything from us this episode. Josh has got to race off to go and watch the Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga music video.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go and do some work and drink some water because I've just realized I feel very dehydrated for some reason. And normally, I'm choking.
You sound a bit dehydrated.
Normally, I have a cup of water next to me when we do this, and I'm sipping all through. And I've
Mm-hmm.
just realised I haven't had one.
All right. Well, you better go
So,
and lubricate your voice.
okay, and I'm going to go and remember the glory days of Australian championship winning sport performances as well,
All
and
right.
feel some national pride.
We'll try not to get into any online altercations with Boy George if you can help it.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best, but
Um,
you'll never know. If I if I text you about being handcuffed to a radiator somewhere,
mhm.
come and get me, please.
Okay.
You'll know who to tell the police is responsible.
Well, I'll see you later this evening, won't I? Because we're going to a gig.
Oh,
We're
I
going to
forgot about
see
that.
we're going to
Yes.
see Dan Sultan, an Australian singer, in fact. So
Oh,
I'll see
there
you
you
this
go.
evening. So if I don't see
Okay.
you, I'll know you're chained up to a radiator by Boy George.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the meantime, if you want to follow us, all our social handles for the podcast will be at the end of the episode. And if you want to follow me, you can find me online at Josh and the Jumpstarts, which is my music handle. And Sean, what
And
about
I'm
you?
Fat Gay Vegan, so you can follow me anywhere at Fat Gay Vegan. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can hit the little subscribe button down at the bottom, and that will let you know when a new episode comes out, which is every Tuesday. But if you are a forgetful person and you would like reminding, you can subscribe to the channel.
You can do that on Spotify as well. Our podcast is on Spotify. If you want to listen there, you can subscribe on Spotify. We're not on Apple Podcasts currently, but we might at some point be.
And before you tune in next time, if you do have a recurring nightmare you'd like to share with us, let us know and we'll
Does
read it out on air.
does it have to be a nightmare? Can you have a nice recurring dream? Does that
Yeah,
ever happen?
I'm sure you can. I'm sure that happens to people.
Then you wake up and you realize that life is a piece of shit.
Life is the recurring nightmare.
Uh-huh. Day after day after day after day. All right,
Okay.
folks. Well, on that cheerful note, Sean, I'll see you in a few hours, and
Okay.
the rest of you, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.